In today's episode, I'm telling you a case of the first man who was killed by lethal injection in Florida for the year 2024. Not the first man ever, just for the year of 2024. This case started out with a horrifying attack in Ocala National Forest and ultimately led to a 30-year journey on death row. Let's get into your Florida Man Friday. Welcome, lambs. Welcome to Love and Murder, Heartbreak to Homicide, your Florida Man Friday edition. If you're new here, hi, my name is Kai, and I welcome you to sit, listen to this episode, and if you like it, then go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any more true crime episodes. If you're a returning lamb, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for supporting me, for supporting Love and Murder, and for supporting the victims of these cases. Before we begin, I want to remind you that this episode and all my episodes are sponsored by who? My lambs in Patreon. Patreon.com/Love and Murder. If you ever thought about joining the Patreon, now is the time to do it, as we have a November Black Friday sale going on for the entire month of November, where you get everything that I put out in Patreon for only $5 a month donation. Patreon.com/Love and Murder. And you only have till the end of November to act on this. Oh my God, when I tell you the rant I ranted in there, I literally had to stop in the middle of recording this episode because I was about to flip a table. You're missing some interesting cases in the Patreon. Patreon.com/Love and Murder. But without further ado, let's get into your Florida Man Friday. Loran Kensley Cole, known by Loran Cole, Casey Cole, and just randomly David Bryant, was born on November 11th, 1966 in Iowa. His childhood was full of instability and trauma, and much of it stemming from his home life. Both of his parents, Don and Ann Cole, struggled with substance and alcohol abuse, which then led to neglect and then led to family dysfunction. Reports from his stepsisters, Anne Marie Powers and Andrea Jane Headley, reveal that Cole's early years included multiple foster care placements and that his mother spent time in prison, and his father, while constantly drunk, would also become violent towards Loran. Then on top of all of that, as if that wasn't enough, arguments between his parents often led to fighting, like physical fighting between his parents and whoever was in the vicinity. In 1984, when Loran was 17, he was sent to Arthur G. Dozer School for Boys. Now, this school apparently has a reputation for abuse. Over the 6 months that he was there, he experienced routine physical and sexual abuse while he was at this school. He was reportedly beaten at least twice weekly, raped by a guard, and even had both legs broken after he tried to escape. And you would say, why would his parents send him there? But I mean, they weren't even paying attention while at the house, so I guess they really didn't care. At one point in time, this school was actually under investigation, and Florida students, which included Loran, shared their accounts of torture and brutal treatment while in this school. In their investigation of this school, they found that the school's grounds contained numerous unmarked graves. The state later acknowledged the systematic abuse and gave reparations to its many survivors. This is where he spent his time when he was 17. Between 1985 and 1991, Loran accumulated 13 arrests, including 3 cases of theft and burglary in 1986. This landed him in jail. In 1991, he was sentenced to 5.5 years for grand theft, but was released on parole after serving only 1 year. Basically, they released him because the jail was overcrowded and they just didn't have any place for him. And so they assessed him and labeled him low risk and sent him on his way. In 1994, Loran met a man named William Christopher Paul. William was born on April 19th, 1973, and grew up as an only child in Knoxville, Tennessee. William was known to love camping, and he often spent time outdoors. He usually collected wildflowers and made gifts of them for his mother. William started out as a good student at Gibbs High School, but in 7th grade, he got hooked on weed, and this threw his life off course. He did manage to quit for a bit when he met his first girlfriend, but when they broke up, he went right back into smoking weed. Then by 11th grade, his addiction had completely derailed his education. He just didn't care about school anymore, and he dropped out. After leaving school, he took a job at a nursing home where his mother also worked, and he stayed there for 18 months. But then he eventually quit after, quote, getting into trouble. His mother 100% believed that with him smoking marijuana, this was the root of all of his issues. Then, after working with the nursing home, he spent some time in Georgia before he went right back to Florida. So now, let's get into the day of February 18th, 1994. John Edwards and his sister Pam went to Ocala National Forest for a weekend camping trip. John, who was 18 years old, was actually a Florida State University student. He loved outdoors and he loved photography. And he often went out looking for opportunities to do both at the same time. So a camping trip would be a wonderful opportunity to be outside and to take pictures of nature. Pam, who was 21, was a senior at Eckerd College in St. Petersburg, Florida. Just like her brother, she loved the outdoors and she loved photography. So this is a great trip for them both. As they were setting up their campsite in Hopkins Prairie in the Ocala National Forest, a stranger came up to them and offered to help them set up everything. The guy introduced himself as Kevin. After helping them settle in and set everything up, Kevin briefly left but returned again a bit later with another man. This man he introduced as his brother. The two men joined the siblings around the campfire, talking and eating with them until about 10:45 p.m. That's when they said, "Hey, y'all want to go for a walk? I know a pond up the way and we could look for alligators and take pictures of these alligators." So John and Pam said, "Sure, let's do that. You know, a reason to go get pictures of nature? Of course, let's go." And they've been there with them all day, chilling, talking. I guess they just trusted these strangers. So when they started walking towards the pond that they told the siblings about, out of nowhere, Kevin lunged at Pam. He handcuffed her and threw her to the ground. John obviously tried to fight because, you're messing with my sister. What are you doing? But he was overpowered by both men and forced down beside his sister. Kevin's brother then took Pam back up the trail while Kevin stayed behind with John. While John was alone with Kevin, Kevin slashed his throat and beat him severely, leaving him to die from the neck wound and skull fractures. While John lay dying, Pam was taken back to the campsite, and Kevin threatened her, saying that he was going to kill her if she didn't do exactly what he told her to do. And then he went on to sexually assault her. The next day, again, she was sexually assaulted. She was gagged and then tied to a tree, and both men just left. They actually got into one of their car, one of John or Pam's car. It doesn't say exactly whose car. And they also left with their cash, credit cards, and other valuables that the siblings had come with. So all of this just happened out of nowhere. This guy just shows up. "Hey, I'll help you build this campsite up. Let me go get my brother," comes back, sits, chills with them, eats up their food, laughs with them, says, "Hey, let's go for a walk," and then just out of nowhere does this. 2 days after the attack, Pam managed to free herself. She was tied to the tree for 2 days, and she managed to free herself by chewing through her ropes. They were just going to let her sit there and starve to death, I guess, or maybe think the animals were going to find her or something. These people are, oof. Anyway, she chewed through her ropes, and then she went in search of her brother, but then she couldn't find him. Eventually, she flagged down a passing car and was able to call 911 and reported what happened to the police. So the police came up to the site, and later in that day, they discovered John's body. After this, they launched a massive investigation to find out who did this and bring them to justice. The good thing is, they had a witness. Pam described her attackers, particularly the man who introduced himself as Kevin. Once they got a drawing of this Kevin, they were able to cross-reference this information with known offenders in the area, and it led them right to Loran. It also led them right to William. These are now the two prime suspects. On February 22nd, 1994, just days after the attack, authorities arrested Loran and William in Ocala. They were found in possession of items that belonged to the Edwards siblings, including their car. They still had their car. They still had their credit cards. They still had their jewelry. What was the plan? You were going to use their credit card and you didn't think anybody would be able to track you? You had their car? Maybe he thought that Pam was going to die and there would be nobody looking for this for a while. I don't know. They weren't thinking because they did this crime anyways. So of course, being that they found all of that on them, that's concrete evidence linking them to the crime. Both men were arrested and charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, robbery, and sexual battery. Loran's trial began in 1995, just a year after the murder of John. The prosecution built a strong case against Loran by emphasizing the brutality of the crimes and showing that he had a clear intent to kill. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't have slashed somebody's throat or tied somebody to a tree and left them for dead. They also presented forensic evidence, including fingerprints and DNA. They argued that Loran had orchestrated the whole thing and the goal was ultimately robbery and dominance. The prosecution pointed at Loran as being the primary aggressor because he was the one who stayed behind with John and slit his throat and killed him horribly. Basically, he had brain bleed and skull fractures, meaning that he was beaten so severely. So they said Loran was the primary aggressor. So then their thing was they wanted to focus on how premeditated the crime was. They pointed out that both William and Loran initially befriended the siblings only to assault them. They made sure that the area was isolated. They made sure that they got the siblings to trust them. And then they did this. So by the evidence of this being a premeditated crime, the prosecution asked for the death penalty. So the defense, here comes the defense, attempted to frame Loran as influenced by his troubled past. He had a history of severe abuse at the Arthur Dozer School for Boys. Like, you cannot blame this on him. Do you know he spent 6 months there and what happened? And also his parents were abusive and they were drunks and they were drug addicts. It's not his fault. They said his trauma when he was growing up led him to be psychologically damaged. So none of this is his fault. And they asked the judge, Your Honor, please consider his background, including the physical and sexual abuse that he suffered at that school. And I want you to think on this while you're considering his sentencing, Your Honor. The defense also tried to shift some of the responsibility to William, which, duh. The prosecution should have done that as well, because even though William wasn't there for the murder of John, he did help sexually assault Pam, even while Loran was still with John. So, and then he tied Pam up. So, of course, some of the blame should be on him. It's not all on Loran. But the defense was trying to take it off of Loran and say that William had the more significant role in the attacks. Loran's defense also claimed that maybe y'all didn't look too much into William's involvement. How do you know it was Loran who murdered John and it wasn't William who murdered John? And the prosecution was like, Exhibit A, Your Honor. The literal witness is here to say what happened. So the defense was like, damn it. So basically that struck out the defense's claim and their case crumbled because they had nothing. Because they had nothing to begin with. It's just, I just don't understand these kind of lawyers. Like, this horrible, demented murder occurred and you literally are trying to find a way to defend these people. I'm telling you, I wouldn't be a good defense lawyer. I just wouldn't. I would be telling the judge, while I'm supposed to be defending, how guilty my client is. Ultimately, as they should, the jury sided with the prosecution, and they sided with logic and morals. And they found Loran guilty of all charges. And they also recommended the death penalty, as with the prosecution. William opted to avoid a full trial, and he entered a plea agreement. And in 1995, he pled guilty to the charges, including second-degree murder, kidnapping, and robbery. And by accepting the plea deal, he received 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. And then on December 21st, 1995, Loran was sentenced to death for the murder of John. After his conviction, of course, Loran started appealing immediately. And he went through several appeals, claims of ineffective legal counsel, arguments about Florida's death penalty, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to go through each one of his appeals. His appeals. The process lasted 30 years. 3 decades he's been trying to appeal this death sentence. In 2011, Loran's attorney even tried to introduce evidence of his traumatic experience at that boys' school, even though you did that in court, and even though that's not an excuse. Unfortunately, in this world, people are abused, and they don't turn to murder. It's not an excuse, and stop trying to make fetch happen, Gretchen. They said that you had to understand Loran's experiences to understand his behavior. Quote, that horrible place helped create the Loran Cole that sits on death row today. Bullshit! The bullshit! Whoa. Anyways, let's get into the appeals. The first appeal was claims of ineffective legal counsel. Loran argued that his trial attorneys provided ineffective assistance. He claimed they failed to present mitigating evidence during the sentencing phase that could have influenced the jury's decision to recommend the death penalty. Dude, you slit a man's throat in cold blood and then you essayed his sister. What could they have freaking presented that would have swayed the jury? I want to know what you think they could have presented to sway the jury from the death penalty. After that appeal, the Florida State Supreme Court said, no, go back and rot in jail until it's your time to die in jail. The second appeal he went for was mental health and background. Again, this is like the same thing over and over, just wording it slightly different. So his attorney introduced evidence from the boys' school where he endured severe physical and sexual abuse. And I just want to say this. If this school was open for so long, yeah, and there are multiple boys there, why are there not a slew of serial killers just all over the United States from this boys' school? If this is what we're supposed to believe, this is what we're supposed to take and say, you know what, the school messed him up. Why is every other boy that wasn't there? He was only there for 6 months at 17. What about the boys that were there longer or younger? Why aren't they going across the whole United States doing this? If this is what we're supposed to believe and just feel so bad for him for. Is it a bad thing that happened? Yes. But are we supposed to believe we have to understand his background and this is why he's doing this? Lucky I'm not a judge because I literally cuss you out. Anyways, the Florida Supreme Court ruled that this evidence was not enough to change the sentence. And again, sit down and wait for your time to die. The third appeal that he went for was challenging Florida's death penalty constitutionality. They challenged Florida's death penalty system, citing issues with the constitutionality of its procedures. They argued that the state sentencing practices violated the 8th Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. But the Florida court said, shut the fuck up. They didn't say that. I said that. But basically, they said, go back. No. Appeal denied. Stop it. But did they stop it? No. They were on a quest for justice. So the fourth appeal was jury unanimity and aggravating factors. So the legal team raised concerns about the jury's role in the sentencing, arguing that the jury was not required to reach a unanimous decision regarding aggravating factors. So that's what it was then, but actually Florida has changed that. And for the death penalty, it requires a unanimous jury recommendation. But that was then, and this is now. So you're in the then, and so your case didn't fall under that. So please, for the love, go back and wait till it's your time to be executed. And finally, they did another appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Governor Ron DeSantis has signed Loran's death warrant on July 29th, 2024, scheduling the execution for August 29th at 6 p.m. His attorneys then tried this final appeal, focusing on two main arguments. Number one, they challenged the execution method. They said Cole had Parkinson's disease that was diagnosed in 2017, and they said the condition would make it, quote, impossible for Florida to safely and humanely carry out his execution because his involuntary body movements will affect the placement of the intravenous lines. If I was a judge, I would be like, well, then I could slit his throat like he slit John's throat if that'll be more humane to you. And then I'll just sit there looking at them. And the second thing his attorneys pointed out was to the 2024 Florida law establishing a $20 million compensation program for Dozer school abuse survivors. You're still on that? What about all the other survivors? They're not in there with Loran. So they said with this compensation that's going on, this represented, quote, newly discovered evidence. And so they wanted a fresh review of Loran's death sentence. What does apples have to do with the cost of tea in Jamaica? I don't understand the correlation here. The Florida Supreme Court rejected both arguments, and in regarding the Parkinson's disease claim, the court said that Loran, quote, failed to raise any argument related to the method of execution until after the governor signed the death warrant. So you've had this since 2017. Why now are you saying anything? On the school compensation law, they ruled that, quote, it does not amount to newly discovered evidence. Because it's nothing. What newly discovered evidence? So no, we don't need to go back over his case and his sentencing. So after all of that, on August 29th, 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to intervene, and they rejected both of the appeals and the request for the stay of execution. And so right on time, as it was scheduled, August 29th, 2024, at the Florida State Prison in Rayford, 57-year-old Loran Cole was executed for the murder of then 18-year-old John and 21-year-old Pam. The execution was carried out by lethal injection. In his final hours, Loran spent time with his son. He had a son. You had a child, and this is what you decided to go out and do instead? That whole time? Oh, never mind. Okay. Anyway, so he spent his time with his son, and he spent his time with a pen pal. Someone was writing him. And then his final meal, he decided to have pizza, ice cream, M&Ms, and soda. When they asked him if he had any final words, he said, quote, no, sir. So the lethal injection procedure started at 6:03 p.m. and witnesses did report that Loran exhibited brief physical reactions before going completely still, and he was pronounced dead at 6:15 p.m. 19 people were in attendance, including the Edwards family. They had waited 30 years for justice. So they sat and watched this happen. So like I said, Loran's execution was the first in Florida in the year of 2024, and it was actually the 13th in the United States for 2024. And that is the case of Loran K. Cole. What did you think about that? Do you agree that the abuse that he endured at the boys' school should have been taken into consideration when they were sentencing him? and maybe he shouldn't have been sentenced to death. Do you think that? Let me know in the comments below, and I will actually put that out as a poll question. You could just say yes or no. And speaking of comments, let's get into your comments from past Florida Man Friday episodes. So last week's episode was of David Jackson and Gordon Wanser, and a lamb named No, literally that's their name, said they will be taken care of over and over in reference to the last animal. The guards help. Don't worry, they aren't done yet. And then Christina Bobo said, he looks like the crooks, and I'm guessing she's talking about the one that was found in the dryer. If you didn't see that, go to the Facebook After the Pod group, and I do have the picture of him in the dryer, or you could sign up on our Patreon, which it's on sale right now. Patreon.com/Love and Murder, and I had more pictures in there. So like I was saying, Christina Bobo said, he looks like the crooks when caught by Scooby and the gang. He would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for that middling cop with the keen eye. I think he should get an A+ for creativity. Now I'm curious to know other creative hiding places of criminals, which I might do a bonus episode of that, creative hiding places of criminals. That would be a really good bonus episode for 2025. And if you missed last week's case, the link is in the show notes below, so you can go ahead and listen to it. And then also, since this was a bonus episode, I'll just read it on this Florida Man Friday. I did put out a bonus episode on me playing Would You Rather, so you could kind of see what's coming in the Patreon group. So I'm starting a new thing for 2025. Not only are we doing bonus true crime episodes, but I kind of want to do some lighthearted stuff in there as well. So for the bonus Would You Rather, I asked 5 different questions and asked you, to answer the question. Play along with me. Christina Bobo answered, so one of the questions was, would you rather go to jail for 5 years or be in a coma for 10 years? So she said, jail for 5 years for sure. My friend was in a coma for 3 months, and he said he was literally in hell, and the way he explained it seemed like an ongoing nightmare. I've listened to others' near-death experiences. While some seem to have good experiences, there are way too many that have frightful ones for me. Then the other question I asked is, would you rather have telekinesis or telepathy? And she said, I'd rather have telekinesis because I think it's a violation to know what someone else is truly thinking. We deserve to have our private thoughts. I'd probably spend a lot of time picking up my hooks and needles when they fall. My back is not what it used to be. So this will do wonders for me. I'd also use my powers to do cool tricks with my kids. Thinking of like Matilda. If you haven't seen Matilda, a cool movie. She then said, P.S. I love this game. Can't wait to join the Patreon. Can't wait to have you in the Patreon, Christina. Wait till you hear some of the Kyrants in there. The Kyrants in there that I do are stuff that I don't even do on the outside. And you hear the rant. Oof. The rants I rants in there is not the same rants I rants out here. So can't wait to have you. And if anybody who wants to join the Patreon, like I said, now is the half off November sale. Now is your time to join. $5 a month gets you the top tier that we have in there, but just for the month of November. Patreon.com/Love and Murder. And if you missed this bonus episode, I also will have that in the show notes below. So then y'all could play along. Tell me your answers. Which one would you rather? I would love to hear from you. And we actually have a voice comment. If you didn't remember, you can actually go to the website, murderandlove.com, and on the home page, there's the SOS button where you could actually leave me a voice message. I think it's only like 30 seconds long, but if you wanted to leave a longer one, you can always record a voice message on your phone and then send it to the email, noconductradio@gmail.com, and it'll be played on air just like this one. Brittany from Austin, Texas sent in a voice message.
Hey, Kai. I just want to let you know that I love the podcast. Shout out to you. Keep doing your thing, girl. I listen to Florida Man Fridays faithfully, and I love the content. So just keep it coming. Blessings to you.
Thank you so much for that voice message, Brittany. You have no idea the kind of smile it put on my face. So thank you, and thank you for calling in. And that is all the comments that I have for you today. Don't forget, about the Patreon sale, patreon.com/loveandmurder. Don't forget that a free and easy way to help me out is by simply sharing this episode. So go in your text messages, share this link with your family and friends, and also go over to our social media, Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube, and share one of the clips with your social media friends. So everyone you know and everyone you don't. And that's all I have for you in this Florida Man Friday, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.